A lot of new investors die off because their expectations are too high. And the way my buddy describes this is if your expectations here and reality's down here, this difference is called hell. But if your expectations are here and reality's up here, this is called bliss. And I see this in a lot of aspects of life. A lot of new investors have these expectations that are way too high. And if you think that a deal will just automatically come your way in a few weeks, you're going to easily get frustrated and more than likely you're going to quit. And I think that having poor expectations has been one of the biggest things that have stopped people from having success in real estate investing. It does take work. It does take effort. It's simple, but it's not easy. So let's talk about realistic expectations. How long does it really take to find a deal? That's what we're going to be talking about today. So we're going to be covering the time frames to find a good deal, the factors that change your time frame, make them shorter, make them longer. My recommendation for getting started today are some things we're going to talk about. So let's just kind of peel the onion back a little bit. Some factors on how long it will take to find a deal. There's a lot of things that are involved here. The market you're in, the geographic location is going to have something to do with how fast you can actually find a deal. The competition that is in the area is going to have an effect on how fast you're going to be able to find a deal. What type of buyers are you trying, what type of market are you in? And is it a seller's market or a buyer's market? And what does that really mean? Okay, so a seller's market is when the seller has the advantage where there's fewer sellers than there are buyers. A buyer's market means there's more sellers than there are buyers, which means prices typically go down. And if it's a buyer's market, prices are going down. If it's a seller's market, prices are typically going up. That's in general terms. How much time are you willing to spend? How much are you willing to invest your time in? Are you able or willing to spend money on marketing? Your experience in sales. That's just some things we're going to talk about. How committed are you to your success? If the first thing where something goes wrong, are you going to give up right then? That's going to be a big thing. What is your strategy? What's your strategy for finding it? What's your strategy going to be for liquidating, which gets into this? What type of investing are you trying to do? The other thing is you can do base hits or you can do a home run. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about this so we can get in details with it. So first off, let's start out. The market you are in, geographic location. Some areas, the price range is much higher than other areas. Median price range is $700,000 versus $75,000. That is going to make a difference on how long it takes you to find a property. And it's going to make you a difference, a big difference in finding what is actually a good deal. So keep in mind, it typically takes longer if the payoff is there. So keep it in perspective. It typically takes you a little bit longer if you're doing some of the higher end properties. You could make $7,000 on the $75,000 deal or $70,000 on another deal. So it's going to take you longer to find that $700,000 deal, but when you do, it's going to be a bigger paycheck than the $75,000 deal. That's something just to kind of keep in mind as we're talking about generalities here. Okay, your area. You're in a rural community. You are in a major metropolitan area. Major metropolitan is going to be much easier than a rural community. If you live in a rural area, it can be more difficult to make deals happen. And in a rural area, there is typically less opportunity. There's less buyers, there's less homes being sold, there's less people to choose from. So that makes it a lot more difficult if you are in that area. The buyer's pool is typically just smaller. So question is like, well, what if you live in a rural area? How do you invest? Well, my number one recommendation is find a major metropolitan area that you can invest in, that you could drive to within 30 minutes or no more than an hour. It is easier for you to drive to an area than to try and make a rural community work in that area when we're talking about fix and flip type deals. You can also look to change your investing strategy. So you could say, hey, you could invest out of state. You could do wholesale type deals. You could look to doing land type deals. So there's other strategy you could use as well. The competition of other real estate investors. Let's talk a little bit more about this. Some areas have so many real estate investors. It is saturated Other areas have very few real estate investors, and the more real estate investors in your area, the more time it can take to find a good deal. It's always easier to invest in an area that is close to you, so stay within about an hour's drive if you're investing out of your area. You can invest out of state. There's some complexities there. Competition in the area. Don't let this be an excuse to not get started. Oh, there's too many. You won't really know until you get into it. You really won't know until you actually get into it. Let's talk about the type of market you're in. So what type of difference does it make with the type of market you're in? A seller's market. There are fewer sellers than buyers that want those houses. And that leads to prices going up. It leads to them selling faster. Whereas the opposite of that is the buyer's market. There are few buyers than sellers. This leads to prices going down. Time on the market, how long it takes to sell, goes up. And so those are some things to take in consideration here. Now, where to start? Well, let's talk about this. Time or money? Time is you do the work. Money is you buy the work to be done for you. That's kind of be the difference here. Think of it as like a sweat equity. Now, even if you are spending money on advertising, there's still a lot of work for you to do. It's just not going to be as much work as if you are only spending your time. So if you have little to no money for marketing, not a problem. You can put much more time in those and have money for marketing. So you just have to put much more time in. Plan on this. It is going to take you longer to find a property. It just is, so be ready for that. Now, if you have money, it costs money. This money could produce results, and the marketing efforts you're doing could bomb out and not produce any results, so there's some risk there. So this also saves you time because you're not having to spend as much time to find a deal as long as the marketing efforts. But there is still time you have to put into this. It's not just like, oh, I'll send some postcards and I'll make $1 million tomorrow. It doesn't work like that. So where to start? Okay, let's just talk about this. Where to start? Well, driving for dollars. We're going to talk about vacant homes. We're going to talk about involuntary liens. These are ways of actually finding properties. Bankruptcies, out-of-state owners, non-owner occupieds, pre-foreclosures, failed listings, classifieds, estate sales, city violations, okay? So those are things that are saying, hey, these are ways that we could try and find some properties here. And you've got to get in touch with the homeowners. No matter what you're going after, you are still gonna have to get in touch with the homeowner. So how do you do this? How do you actually get in touch with the homeowners? How do you contact them? Well, there's a few ways. You gotta contact them. So you've gotta stop by and knock on the door. You've gotta skip trace and call them. You gotta send them an email, or you gotta send them a text message, or you have to send them a regular mail. That's all there is. There's no other way. Text, email, call, stop by, or mail. One of those activities is how you're going to get in touch with somebody. And what you're wanting to do is get in touch with somebody that has a higher propensity to actually want to sell. Meaning if the home's vacant, if they're in a bankruptcy, if they're an out-of-state owner, there's probably a better chance they're going to want to sell. Now, does everyone that lives out of state want to sell? No, but does somebody? It depends on how hard you're going out there to find people. And so you've got to use one of these ways to actually contact the seller and see. So what is a good rule of thumb that we can all just kind of say, hey, this is a good start? Well, I think 35 weeks is a good rule of thumb if you're not planning on spending marketing money. With this, we're planning on $7 per week. If you don't have $7 a week, skip lunch once a week. Spending about 10 hours of work per week. Remember, this is I am going to spend my time, not spend money. So this is a great rule of thumb to kind of think about. But what I have done is we've put together what's called the Next Property Roadmap. And this can help you determine your area and help you determine your strategy. This is what the next property roadmap looks like. You put in here how much money you want to spend, how much time you can spend. It goes through how many calls you're going to have, how many leads, how much time every single week, and it breaks down a week-by-week plan based upon your specific situation and what you're wanting to do. So recommend putting that together because it's going to be different for everybody. Your sales experience. How to Win Friends and Influence People is a fantastic book. I highly recommend that you read that. Sales can be taught, and it's something that you want to get to know. Sales is really just communication. That's all there is to it. You're not going to get somebody to do something that they don't want to do. It's about how you communicate. So, and then also here, this commitment to success. How committed are you to finding success? I find up the very first hurdle that comes up, if people just give up right then, they're not going to find the success they're looking for. So if you're going to give up at the first obstacle, you won't get there. There's going to be lots of obstacles. What is your strategy? What strategy are you going to be using? What type of investment strategies? So there's wholesaling, there's fix and flip, there's BRRRR type deals. What are you going to be looking for is also something that's going to play into time frames. We also want to talk about base hit versus home run. So if you don't have money to put down, you're going to have to find a home run deal. What does that mean? Well, you're going to need to make sure the purchase, the rehab, the closing costs, and payments is all rolled into that 75% or 70% of loan to value. Now, what if it doesn't roll into that? Well, then those are called base hits. It takes a lot longer to find a home run than it is to find a base hit. The base hit basically means you'd have to come up with more cash to actually do that deal. You're going to make less money, but it's a base hit, it's not a home run. If you're trying to do that where you're not putting any of your money into it, you've got to be looking for the home run type deals, and finding home run deals just simply takes longer. Now, the question is, it takes longer, but is it worth it? Let's talk about it. How much do you get paid now? What do you make? $30 an hour, $50,000 a year. $50 an hour is $100,000 per year. So let's say it took you 229 hours. The average profit for fix and flips is about $35,000. That would be making $152 per hour for the 229 hours you've put in work, and that would be equal to $300,000 per year if you could work and get that rate in your investing. We're talking serious here, guys. We're talking about going from $50,000 or $100,000 to $300,000. So the question is it worth it? And the answer is yes, but it's hidden from those who aren't willing to work, because you may have to put in 20 hours, or you might have to put 230 hours or 250 hours before you get a deal, 300 hours, whatever it is. Are you willing to do that? Because most people give up too quickly, and they give up right before there's the opportunity, or they're starting to get there. The other thing you've got to keep in mind here is you're going to improve as you go along. You're going to be like, oh, that was stupid, I'm not going to do that again. And so you'll improve, which means it'll be faster for you to get deals as you see, experiment, and keep track of your numbers. Keeping track of your numbers. Numbers are going to be different for everybody. But what we're talking about is what were your marketing efforts? How many properties did you go after? How many calls did you get? Or how many calls did you make? What did that return to? How many of those turned into appointments? How many of those turned into offers? How many of those went under contract? If you keep track of all of that, then once you get your first deal, you can add those numbers to the blueprint, the next deal blueprint, and you can be using numbers from your last transaction, what it took, and you can say, hey, this is what it took last time. Let's do that process again and see if we can produce another result based upon that. So keeping track of your numbers is something you really want to do, so you can put that into your blueprint as well. Now, this is really key, guys. Don't ever give up, okay? Don't ever give up. That's the biggest thing. So let's talk a little